Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at the second of a pair of Australian Shirazes that I'd like to taste. And it's a wine from the northern Barossa Valley. It's from the Willows Vineyard. It's the curiously named Bonesetter Shiraz. It's a Barossa Shiraz. This is the 2016 vintage of that. Now the name Bonesetter commemorates the fact that in 1845 Johann Gottfried Scholz, better known as JG, and his family emigrated to this area in Light Pass in the northern Barossa Valley near Nuriutpa from their native Silesia. And they were Lutherans, and they'd been persecuted at home, and along with a number of other families moved to this part of South Australia. They acquired a property on the north bank of the Para River, and there he set up a small mixed farm with cows and sheep, some fruit trees, various crops, and probably had a few grapevines. Now JG had been a doctor in the Prussian army in his previous life, and as a result of that acquired a bit of a reputation for setting broken bones. And so it was in the 1850s at one stage that John Howard Angus, of the family that the town Anguston is named after, one of the founding families of the Barossa Valley, rewarded JG with £500 after he had set John Howard's femur, and it had set good and straight. So he granted Dr. Scholz this money to found a small hospital, and actually the Willows Hospital existed for over 100 years, finally closed in the 1960s, and 3 generations of the Scholz family ran that. And in its heyday, evidently it had 30 beds. This was a very successful cottage hospital. Now it was in 1936 that the then Dr. Scholz was persuaded by another important figure in the Barossa's history, somebody called Sam Tolley, who was a key figure in the development of Australia's wine industry. Sam Tolley persuaded the Scholzes to plant their property with vines. They started off planting Shiraz and Semillon, and then also planted Dorado and Pedro Jimenez as grape varieties to produce brandy with as well. As I say, the hospital closed down in the 1960s, and at that stage the 5th generation of the family came to reside here, and Bert and his wife Joan renovated the property, and in 1969 they set about renovating the vineyards, and a good deal of planting and replanting went on. Today, as well as the Shiraz and their Semillon, they also have Riesling planted here. There's Grenache, there's Mataro and Cabernet Sauvignon. Bert's son Peter went to study winemaking at Roseworthy College and was a contemporary of people like Peter Lehmann and Andrew Wigan, and in fact worked for Peter Lehmann for many years. However, Bert had other ideas, and in 1989 they released the first wine under their own label. And today Peter is joined in the winemaking by his son Jack. So Jack is the 7th generation of the Scholz family to be working on the property. Now this particular wine, Bonesetter, is a single vineyard Shiraz, and it comes from one of the blocks that was planted in 1969. The clone type is unknown, but these old vines yield quite sort of small, open bunches that have a lovely deep concentration. The soils here are iron rich. There's a red-brown sandy loam over a red clay. The fruit is entirely hand-picked. It gets destemmed and put into open fermenters. This is very traditional Barossa style winemaking, and in fact the cap of skins is actually punched back down into the ferment. So hand plunging goes on until the wine has fermented to dryness. In total the wine is about 12 days on skins. It then goes into basket presses and is gently pressed into barrel. The wine undergoes its malolactic conversion in the barrel, and that helps to marry the oak notes with the fruit and just to give a warmth, a richness and a roundness to the style of the wine. And the wine will stay for 24 months in oak. This is entirely French oak, 60% of that is new, but it's larger oak barrels. This is hogsheads and demi-muids, so we're talking 350, 500 litre barrels. So larger than your typical barrique, so giving less surface area in terms of wine and a ratio there. An approach that gives a little bit more in oxidation and a little bit less in wood, although there's a fair amount of new wood being used here, obviously. And the Scholzes see 2016 as a standout vintage. There was a warm, dry spring that gave good flowering and fruit set. The season was mild, and there was some summer rain that gave some relief to the vines, and these factors combined to give a large crop of beautiful ripe fruit. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? The first thing to say is that's almost completely opaque. I mean, it's a black ruby holds its colour well to the rim. There is perhaps a reddish purple hint at the rim. As I'm swirling it there, the wine is clinging to the glass. The label says this is 14.9% alcohol. And it not only is it clinging, it's slowly forming tears, and actually the colour is staining the glass slightly. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are of concentrated dark fruit. There is a sort of a leathery developed overtone, but there is a sort of a rich, juicy, dark plum, black cherry, maybe hints of black olive, something slightly savoury there. There are also high-toned notes of mintiness and eucalypt, both quite typical aromas for Barossa Valley Shirazes. The oak, there may be a little bit of vanilla, maybe a touch of cedar behind there, but actually it's the fruit that's the fore in these aromas. So let's have a taste. The wine is very rich and juicy. There's a real warmth at the front of the palate. There's almost a sort of dark, slightly bitter licorice exploding on the front palate. There's a bitterness and also a sweetness there in terms of those licoricey notes. There is that sort of dark, ripe, black plum, damson, high ripeness, black cherry, all those notes going through into that slightly more savoury note of black olive perhaps, as well as the sort of the concentrated licoriciness at the front of the palate. There is good acidity going on in the background. There's a sort of a freshness coming through there. I was talking about minty notes on the nose. There's sort of a little of that on the mid palate, helping give a little bit of freshness there. And there's a juicy black fruit note running through the entire wine that starts to open a little bit more on the back palate there. And it's a black plum. It's got a concentration. There's a slight velvety texture there. This is a full-bodied wine. Not surprisingly, its alcohol's adding some warmth there, but also there's a very fine velvety structure, a sort of a chocolatey richness and chocolatey smoothness. But it's a dark chocolate. There's no sort of milk chocolate softness there. Just on the back palate again, you're seeing these hints of eucalypt. There are those, really quite classic Barossa Shiraz notes, and perhaps actually that's where you're seeing a tiny touch of the sort of classic pepperiness as well. It's not a very powerfully peppery wine, but there are just those little overtones of it at the back there. The concentration of the fruit is almost sort of closing up the finish a bit. The wine has quite a long finish, but the concentrated fruit is actually still quite brooding, and it's not as open as I think it will be in a couple of years, and it might show a bit more red fruit on the finish by that stage, a little bit more sort of perfume and lift. But there's a wonderful concentration, and I'm talking about the fact that this has 14.9% alcohol, so practically 15, but it doesn't actually finish with an alcoholic heat, because such is the concentration of the fruit that there's enough to balance that. There is a little bit of warmth and roundness, but it doesn't stand out particularly. Again, the oak. We know this is a wine that spent 2 years in oak, but actually it's very well married to the fruit. It doesn't particularly stand out. Perhaps it's contributing a little bit of sort of vanilla-y sweetness to the back palate, but there aren't plenty of exotic cedary sweet spice notes standing out here. So yes, I think this is a wine that's probably best left for another couple of years to age. I mean, it's 2016. It's already 8 years old, but I think probably another, certainly at least 3 or 4 years. And I should imagine it would keep for 5 or 6 years after that still. So yes, I think quite classic Barossa style. It's concentrated, it's rich, it's ripe. Despite being a big, full-bodied wine, it actually has some balance, some charm and some elegance to it. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. If you have friends who you think would love to watch it, we'd be delighted if you'd share it with them. If you have any comments you want to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. I will of course leave a link to the page for this vintage of this wine on the Wine Searcher website, so you can check on its availability, its pricing, and look at any of the other details we have there about the wine. So yes, thank you again for joining us, and do please try and take some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.